The Obsidian Council chamber was a gulf of echoing shadow, vast enough to contain a minor moon, its vaulted ceiling lost in depths where even the ambient bioluminescence of the great spire failed to penetrate. At the focal point, where the crystalline floor met the shimmering dais, the representatives of the triarchy, the Sylvans of Ethel, the Krill hegemon, and the ancient, silent progenitors, regarded the projection. It was a single, impossible object, a vessel of brutalist efficiency, scarred by the vacuum, utterly lacking the sweeping, graceful lines dictated by eons of refined interstellar engineering. It moved with a reckless velocity that defied the nuanced gravity drives of the established galactic powers, and it was bearing down on the outer sentinel markers of the Triarchy's core systems. Its designation remains unverified, intoned the Sylvan arbiter Kalen of the Seventh Canopy, his voice a low, synthesized thrum resonating through the chamber's carefully balanced acoustic fields. His crystalline form shifted, refractors catching the faint light, signaling profound unease. The designation assigned by the probe was the Indomitable, a rather provincial choice for a first contact vessel of this implied capability. Lord Krillthrax, the hegemon's appointed voice, manifested as a shifting mass of segmented chitin and light-absorbing plating, radiated contemptuous confusion. Provincial is insufficient, Arbiter. It is crude. Its propulsion signature indicates archaic fusion burn residuals mixed with a temporal displacement field that violates at least 3 established laws of unified physics we have codified since the Great Silence. It is a projectile, not a starship. Why would a species capable of traversing the void at such speeds choose to arrive in such a manner? It suggests either profound arrogance or catastrophic error in navigation. The progenitors, represented only by a singular, perfectly smooth obsidian monolith floating slightly above the dais, remained silent, but the temperature in the chamber dropped perceptibly, a psychic chill signaling their immense disapproval of the uncertainty. They perceived time and causality in ways the other 2 species struggled to grasp, and the sudden, violent arrival of this solitary craft resonated with them as a jarring, illogical rupture in the tapestry of expected reality. For cycles, the Triarchy had managed the periphery of this sector, maintaining the delicate balance of power, subtly guiding emerging civilizations away from self-destruction, or, if necessary, carefully pruning them before they could destabilize the intricate political framework built over millennia. They understood ambition, they understood terror, they understood the calculus of overwhelming force. But this singular ship presented none of those known variables. The scans confirm no active diplomatic markers, no established frequency handshake, Kalen continued, his voice strained by the lack of actionable data. It has bypassed the outermost defense grids, not by breaching them, but by ignoring them. Our most sophisticated stealth countermeasures, systems designed to cloak entire armadas, registered the vessel as a temporary ripple in background radiation, a ghost that vanished before the processors could lock a tracking signature. Krillthrax clicked his mandibles, a sound like shattering ice. A ghost that intends to occupy real space within 3 local rotations of the primary system. We must respond with overwhelming deterrence. If they possess technology that renders our established defense protocols irrelevant, we must present an overwhelming threat they cannot afford to ignore. Mobilize the deterrent cruisers to the outer perimeter of the Thashan Veil. Let the sheer scale of our defensive posture communicate the gravity of this intrusion. The Arbiter hesitated, his internal matrices warring with the ingrained caution of Sylvan jurisprudence. Deterrence, hegemon, invites escalation. If this vessel truly embodies the technological anomalies its trajectory suggests, overwhelming force may simply be an invitation to observe the efficiency of their counter-response. Consider the precedent. We have catalogued hundreds of nascent spacefaring species. None have ever arrived with such disregard for established protocol. This humanity, the designation derived from the fragmented subspace beacon they occasionally transmit, is an unknown factor exceeding acceptable risk parameters. He brought up a secondary projection, a complex probabilistic model overlaid on the trajectory path. The projection was a violent wash of red and black, signaling cascading failure possibilities. The risk profile is unacceptable. We cannot negotiate from a position of ignorance, nor can we afford to be reactive. Their singular focus, their refusal to engage with the established galactic lexicon of greeting, suggests an operational doctrine fundamentally divergent from all known sentience. Philosophy. They do not appear interested in conversation, they appear interested in arrival. The progenitor monolith pulsed once, a deep, resonant thrum that momentarily suppressed the ambient noise of the chamber. A wave of pure analytical comprehension washed over the other two species, a silent communication that felt less like words and more like the sudden, undeniable understanding of a universal constant. Fear is an indulgence. Observation is paramount. They are the anomaly. Do not react to the anomaly with established reaction sets. They are coming to a predetermined location, the progenitor projection finally communicated, its voice bypassing auditory senses and settling directly into the cognitive centers of the arbiter and the hegemon, cold and absolute. They have locked onto the resonance signature of the primary diplomatic nexus, the structure known to them only as Sol 3 Prime. They are not attacking. They are presenting themselves at the designated locus of authority. This is not an invasion. It is a demanding of audience. Krilthrax recoiled slightly, the shifting plates on his carapace momentarily freezing. Demanding audience? With what authority? They are a level 0 civilization, barely possessing stable warp capability a century prior by our historical assessment. How could they possibly intuit the location of the centralized authority nexus, a location known only through secured subspace triangulation shared among the hegemonic powers? They did not intuit it, Kalen murmured, adjusting his spectral output to display the ship's internal energy bleed. They derived it. Look closely at the subtle distortions in their field envelope. They are not using known charting methods. They are calculating structural resonance across vast, deep space anchors, the very bones of the galaxy. They have reverse-engineered the underlying geometry of local spacetime faster than we have charted it in the last 10 millennia. The realization settled like radioactive dust. Humanity, this unknown entity from the fringes, had bypassed millennia of political maneuvering and technological stratification simply by understanding the underlying architecture of reality better than the established empires that sought to control it. They hadn't breached the firewall. They had simply walked through the wall where the architect failed to calculate load-bearing stresses. If they understand space-time geometry at this level, Krilthrax stated, his voice stripped of its previous arrogance, replaced by a tone of chilling calculation, their military applications, should they choose to weaponize that understanding, are currently incalculable. We must treat this arrival not as an incursion, but as the definitive test of our diplomatic stability. Arbiter, initiate Protocol Omega-0. Prepare the Nexus for controlled engagement. We will meet this singular vessel with the full complement of the Triarchy's ceremonial guard, emphasizing display over aggression. Kalen nodded, the light within his crystalline structure dimming to a respectful, almost somber hue. We shall present the facade of calm governance. But hegemon, be aware, we are inviting a creature whose behavior we cannot predict into the heart of our governance. If they are truly as advanced as their physics suggests, we are no longer negotiating parity, we are petitioning for tolerance. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of an empire suddenly realizing its foundation was built on sand, awaiting the arrival of the unknown architects who understood the cement better than they did. The descent into the Nexus sector was a masterpiece of controlled tension. The Indomitable, a vessel that seemed forged from dense, matte black ferroalloys and angular aggression, did not slow gracefully as it entered the calibrated gravity wells. Instead, it utilized nearly imperceptible bursts of gravitational manipulation, nudging itself along the designated arrival vector with the terrifying precision of a surgeon's scalpel, a scalpel wielded by a madman. The Nexus was a symphony of established order. Vast orbital arrays, glittering with millions of defensive nodes, rotated in perfect synchronization. Within this defensive shell, the primary reception platform, a kilometer-wide disk of polished, inert durasteel, awaited. Upon this disk, the combined forces of the Triarchy were arrayed. Sylvan kinetic shields shimmered in tight formations, their internal matrices humming with suppressed energy. The Krill heavy guard stood as immobile towers of armored might, their weapon apertures subtly charged. And positioned directly before the primary docking spire stood the diplomatic delegation, three figures selected for their vast experience in navigating the treacherous currents of galactic politics. Commander Valerius of the human contingent, the only entity they knew to possess a name, derived from the fragmented radio signals, had VD'd only a single statement upon being notified of the defensive deployment. We acknowledge your posture. We require 3 standard docking locks and immediate interface access to your primary diplomatic network. Interference will be considered an act of war. There was no threat in the message, only a statement of operational necessity. This lack of emotional coloring, this pure, axiomatic declaration of intent, was perhaps the most unsettling element of all. As the Indomitable finally achieved its final deceleration burn, its massive, blunt prow dwarfed the reception platform. The ship was a study in functionalism devoid of aesthetics. It looked built to survive a supernova, not to attend a council. When the loading ramp, a structure that seemed to fold out of the hull with impossible structural integrity, finally extended with a low, grinding sound that vibrated through the station's foundations, a deep, profound silence fell over the assembled military. 3 figures emerged. They were not clad in the shimmering, energy-dampening fabrics favored by established spacefaring species, nor did they utilize environmental suits that molded to their forms. They wore heavy, segmented armor of a dull gray material that seemed to absorb light, bulky, and seemingly cumbersome. Their posture was ramrod straight, their movements deliberate, devoid of the fluid grace characteristic of species evolved under lower gravity or greater atmospheric pressure. The central figure, presumably Commander Valerius, stopped at the very edge of the ramp, facing the assembled might of the Triarchy. The millions of energy points pointed his way, and did nothing. He did not raise a hand, did not initiate a greeting protocol. He simply stood, projecting an aura of utter stillness. Kalen, standing at the apex of the Sylvan delegation, finally broke the silence, his voice amplified to resonate across the vast platform. Vessel designated Indomitable, you have entered the sovereign space of the Triarchy without prior declaration or sanction. Identify your purpose and the nature of your species, human. The human remained motionless for a beat that stretched into geological time. Then, the central figure raised one armored hand, not in salutation, but to signal an action. From the shoulder joint of the armor, a small, box-like device detached and floated forward on a barely visible gravitic cushion, settling gently between the human delegation and the Triarchy line. It projected no light, no sound, no energy signature the Triarchy sensors could immediately categorize. It simply was. "We are humanity," a voice finally responded, synthesized through the suit's external speakers, flat and unwavering, lacking any inflection that might betray origin or emotional state. It was a voice built for clarity, not charm. "Our purpose is simple, mutual defense against the encroaching void plague detected in the Perseus arm. We did not seek sanction, we sought the recognized center of operational command. Your defensive posture is noted, but irrelevant to our immediate objective." Krilthrax's vocalizer crackled with barely suppressed fury. "Irrelevant? You approach the seat of galactic governance with a weaponized vessel displaying physics-defying signatures, and you deem our established defense perimeter irrelevant. You misunderstand your place, creature." The human tilted its head slightly, a gesture that seemed oddly analytical. "We understand our place precisely. You are the established authority managing a localized stability matrix. We are aware of the encroaching threat, a threat your complex political structures have apparently failed to mobilize against effectively, judging by the time elapsed since the first predictive data was released into the general subspace chatter 5 local years ago. This was the first true blow. The Void Plague, a rapidly mutating cluster of non-baryonic energy lifeforms, was the Triarchy's most guarded secret, a creeping threat they had been attempting to quarantine through subtle disinformation campaigns and localized military action, hoping to resolve it before it reached population centers. "How do you possess this knowledge?" Kalen demanded, his composure finally fracturing. "That data stream was classified above the 6th security echelon." "Your classification structures are irrelevant to thermodynamic reality, Arbiter Kalen," the human replied, using the Arbiter's full designation with unnerving ease. "We are humans. We observe, we analyze, and we act upon verified data, regardless of the geopolitical sensitivities surrounding its dissemination. We bypassed your encryption not through brute force, but by utilizing mathematical constants derived from observing the universal background radiation fluctuations, the very noise your systems filter out as irrelevant static. We found the pattern. We found the threat signature." The human gestured toward the small floating device. "This platform contains the complete kinetic and biological analysis of the plague, our proposed mitigation strategy, and the operational blueprints for the necessary countermeasures. We require full access to your resource allocation grid and the authority to deploy our containment methodology across the entire affected zone. We are not here to negotiate alliances or discuss cultural exchange. We are here to initiate a quarantine operation that requires the immediate cessation of all non-essential political wrangling. The sheer audacity of the demand paralyzed the observers. They expected primitive belligerence, or perhaps groveling submission for a place at the table. They had received an ultimatum delivered with the detached certainty of a planetary climate model. "This is arrogance beyond comprehension," Krillthrax spat. "We possess star lanes that traverse galaxies, we command technologies you cannot even perceive, and you arrive in one primitive, ugly ship, demanding control of our operational theaters." The human took a single, measured step forward, crossing the invisible line where the Triarchy's immediate defense perimeter began. The energy shielding around the Sylvan contingent flared violently, registering the intrusion, but the human did not flinch, nor did the shield physically repel the intrusion. It merely registered the contact. "Your technologies, Hegemon Krillthrax," the human stated, the name rolling off the synthesizer with an odd, almost clinical precision, "are based on manipulating known forces within an established, relatively narrow energy spectrum. We have spent the last 2 centuries mastering the manipulation of the quantum uncertainty inherent in the local fabric. Your star lanes are predictable. Our method of travel is probabilistic, making us functionally unlocatable when not actively broadcasting location. Your armor is designed to absorb kinetic impacts and energy dispersal. Ours is designed to negate the mechanism of impact before it occurs." Kalen, ever the pragmatist beneath the veneer of serenity, recognized the truth buried beneath the boast. The failure of their tracking systems, the violation of their physics models, it all pointed to an operational capability that rendered conventional warfare futile before it even began. "If this threat is as pervasive as you claim," Kalen interjected smoothly, regaining control, "and if your species is truly capable of stemming it, why risk your entire operational capacity on a single vessel? Why not send a formal delegation, offering expertise for integration into our existing command structure?" The human seemed to contemplate this with the deliberation of a species unused to justifying its necessity. Because integrating into an established structure takes time that the plague consumes exponentially. Furthermore, formal delegation implies parity, a treaty negotiation. We do not require treaties to perform planetary remediation. We require infrastructure access. The second human figure, standing slightly behind the leader, finally moved. This one carried a specialized pack, and with practiced, economical movements, began assembling a deployable communications nexus adjacent to the floating data box. It was an act of profound normalcy set against the backdrop of galactic crisis, a construction crew setting up a mobile command post in a heavily fortified war zone. "We send one vessel because we trust our data implicitly," the leader continued, watching the second human work. "We send one vessel because humanity values efficiency over perceived diplomatic security. We cannot afford the bureaucratic inertia required to vet 1,000 lesser species into a unified command structure when the threat is already active. We deploy the necessary force, the necessary expertise, and we execute the solution. If upon successful remediation, you find our methods incompatible with your established ethical framework, you may then choose to terminate relations, but the plague will already be inert." This was the heart of the human enigma, an overwhelming capability coupled with a terrifyingly narrow, almost surgical focus on the objective, entirely divorced from the complex webs of ego, territory, and pride that define the Triarchy's existence. They were not seeking dominance, they were seeking task completion. The progenitor monolith emitted a low, resonant vibration, a clear instruction to the council chambers miles above them. "Observe the methodology. Do not interfere with the deployment." Krillthrax glowered, his armor shifting as internal regulators struggled to contain his rising agitation. "We will not yield command authority. We will offer technical assistance, contingent upon full disclosure of your propulsion and defensive schematics." The human leader, Valerius, stopped watching his subordinate and turned his full, helmeted attention back to the hegemon. The gesture was chillingly direct. "We do not trade operational secrecy for access. We offer a garant. Outcome. You have 3 standard hours to grant the requested access parameters before we execute Plan B." "And what is Plan B?" Kalen asked, bracing himself for the declaration of war. "Plan B," Valerius replied, his synthesized voice perfectly calm, is the deployment of localized gravitational disruption fields across the immediate vicinity of the nexus. This will neutralize the threat of any accidental or deliberate hostile action you might attempt while we conduct the remediation in the surrounding systems. It will render your defenses inert, but it will not damage the station itself. We will proceed regardless of your consent, establishing a local safety perimeter entirely outside your command authority. It is a tactical necessity for risk mitigation, not an act of aggression. It was a soft threat delivered with the crushing certainty of a mathematical proof. They were offering collaboration on humanity's terms or unilateral imposition of their solution, and both paths led to humanity dictating the immediate operational tempo. The ensuing 3 hours were the longest in the history of the Obsidian Council. While the delegation remained frozen on the reception platform, a miniature war room had erupted on the command levels above. The Sylvan matrices whirred, attempting to decrypt the schematics provided on the floating data box, schematics that mapped not just energy fields, but the very topology of extra-dimensional space necessary for the human propulsion system. The Krill strategists were in uproar, torn between the humiliation of capitulation and the terror of planetary sterilization via gravitational nullification. The progenitors offered only one intervention, broadcast directly to the arbiter Kalen. Their logic is sound. Their solution addresses the known variable. Their methodology, while alien, adheres to a self-consistent set of physical laws that appear to be superior to our current understanding of localized entanglement. Kalen understood the implicit decree: surrender operational control or become irrelevant in the face of a solution they could not even comprehend. With a sigh that resonated through the Sylvan lattice structure, Kalen initiated the command sequence. Access protocols flooded the communication lines, granting the humans the access they required, but with heavily monitored parameters, an attempt to retain some shred of oversight. The human commander, Valerius, observed the data stream confirming their access. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod to the second technician, who was now fully engaged in linking their mobile nexus to the triarchy grid. Access confirmed, Valerius stated. We commence Phase 1 deployment immediately. Containment parameters will be propagated across the affected quadrant within 2 standard solar cycles. We anticipate the stabilization window to close in approximately 10 local rotations thereafter. During this period, we request absolute silence from all sovereign military assets within the operational zone. The third member of the delegation, silent until this point, finally spoke. This figure was shorter, built with a denser, more powerful frame, and carried no visible equipment. The voice was noticeably different, slightly lower in pitch, possessing a subtle, almost musical cadence beneath the synthesis. We require a single environmental suite aboard the main relay hub, designated the Beacon of Accord. It must be shielded against all conventional forms of exotic scanning and maintained at a temperature of 295 Kelvin with 30% relative humidity. This is not a negotiation. It is a physiological requirement for sustained operational function. Krilthrax scoffed from the distant command level. You require luxury accommodations during a critical deployment. We have stripped our primary research facilities to redirect power to your containment fields. The third human turned slowly toward the hegemon's presumed location, though the armor concealed any visual confirmation of eye contact. Hegemon, you mistake requirement for vanity. The human physiology requires a specific, narrow band of environmental stability to maintain peak cognitive function under the duress of this level of computational stress. Failure to maintain these parameters results in a degradation of analytical capability, leading to operational delays. We are not requesting comfort. We are preemptively mitigating self-inflicted failure due to environmental incompatibility. Do you wish for us to fail, or do you wish for the necessary environment to succeed? The simplicity of the logic was devastating. If they succeeded, the plague was gone, and the price was a small, specialized room maintained at a specific climate setting. If they failed due to physiological stress, the plague consumed everything, rendering the triarchy's pride irrelevant. Kalen intervened quickly, overriding the hegemon's sputtering protest. The suite will be prepared, Im. Immediately, the Indomitable will remain docked. We await the remediation. For the next 10 rotations, the galaxy held its breath, watching the remote sensor feeds of the Perseus arm. The humans, operating from their small dock, linked their crude, brutalist technology to the vast, delicate nervous system of the Triarchy's sensor grid. What they did next stunned the established powers into complete, reverent silence. The human method was not a grand, energetic bombardment or a massive deployment of exotic weaponry. It was subtle, precise, and terrifyingly comprehensive. They did not destroy the Void Plague, they rewrote it. The data box projection had contained the key. The plague was a sentient, self-replicating cascade reaction based on corrupted universal constants. The humans did not fight the cascade. They introduced a superior, stabilizing mathematical imperative into the core matrix of the reaction. On the sensor feeds, the chaotic, shifting energy patterns of the plague did not explode or dissipate. They straightened. They aligned. The chaotic forms coalesced into geometric patterns, then collapsed into inert, stable atomic structures, effectively transforming a cosmic horror into benign, trace atmospheric residue. The transformation occurred over hundreds of light years. A feat of distributed computational power that suggested the indomitable was not merely a ship, but a node in a galaxy-spanning superprocessing network the Triarchy had never conceived of. When the final signature of the Void Plague vanished from the charts, the Triarchy's main command center registered a collective exhalation of relief, so profound it caused minor gravitational fluctuations in the station's internal stabilizers. Valerius transmitted a final message upon the completion of the remediation window. Quarantine status, resolved. Resource commitment, minimal external expenditure relative to threat neutralized. Human assets will now disengage and return to designated transit lanes. We thank you for your temporary cooperation. He offered no pleasantries, no expressions of shared victory, no calls for future collaboration. They had solved the immediate crisis, and now they were leaving. Krilthrax, however, had seen enough. He had witnessed the execution of a problem that had crippled their strategic planning for years, solved by a single, small species using tools they could not perceive. Humiliation was secondary to survival. He personally interfaced with the secure channel to the Nexus platform. Commander Valerius, the hegemon's voice boomed, stripped of all aggression now, laced with a heavy weight of forced respect. You have saved countless sectors from extinction. The Triarchy extends its profound gratitude. Before you depart, we must understand. Your technology, your understanding of spatial mechanics, it surpasses anything we possess. Humanity must be integrated into the greater galactic community. We offer full membership, technological reciprocity, and protection under the Grand Accord. Valerius and his two subordinates stood by the ramp, their armor seeming even more cumbersome and alien in the sudden calm. Hegemon, Valerius responded, his voice flat. Integration implies conformity to existing norms. We do not conform. We observe, we derive, and we solve. Reciprocity of technology is a flawed concept when the foundational premises of that technology are fundamentally different. But your origin, you emerged from the fringes, apparently unaware of the established powers. Yet you possess this capability. Where did you learn to manipulate the geometry of reality? Kalen pressed, leaning into the channel. What taught you the constants of the deep void? Valerius paused, and for the first time the silence felt less like calculation and more like contemplation. We were taught by observation of the remnants of civilizations that failed to heed the warnings, he finally stated. We learned by studying the patterns left behind when the universe attempts to correct flawed constructs. Your Grand Accord, your Triarchy, these are complex, stable systems built upon an assumption of unchallenged local dominance. That assumption is the primary vulnerability. The progenitor monolith pulsed urgently, a warning that vibrated through the bone structure of the Sylvan Arbiter. They are not merely advanced. They are the consequence of an ancient filter. We did not send diplomats, Valerius confirmed, answering Kalen's initial, unspoken fear. We sent the minimum necessary kinetic solution to initiate the next phase of our mandate. We are not joining your community, Hegemon. We are enforcing the necessary preconditions for the universe to continue its necessary processes. He gestured toward the massive, silent vessel behind him. This is not merely a warship, though it can function as one if required. It is a mobile environmental repair unit, optimized for macro-scale triage. We have been observing the wider galactic expanse. See, the Void Plague was localized, but it was not the primary threat. The second technician, having finished his setup, now pointed to the floating data box, which switched its display from plague schematics to an entirely new projection. This image was not a microscopic analysis of energy fields, but a vast, sweeping map of the galaxy, highlighting massive, intersecting geometric distortions spreading rapidly across several spiral arms, distortions far larger and more profound than the void plague. These distortions, the second human explained, their voice possessing that same precise, emotionless clarity, are the signature of uncontrolled, self-propagating causality breakdown. Think of it as universal entropy accelerating beyond its natural decay rate. They appear to originate from a unified, non-local source. The Krill hegemon stared at the image, his carapace plates recoiling from the sheer scale of the depicted destruction. It was galactic collapse in real-time projection. "What causes this?" Kalen whispered, the grandeur of the Obsidian Council momentarily forgotten, replaced by the stark terror of facing oblivion. The third human stepped forward, her synthesized voice resonating with a strange, almost sorrowful finality. "We do not know the intent behind the breakdown, but we know the source. For 3,000 cycles, humanity has followed the breadcrumbs left by those who attempted to halt this process before us. They were not civilizations, they were guardians. They failed. We have traced the origin point to the deep void beyond the Perseus Arm, a region you all designate as the uncharted abyss." She pointed to the epicenter of the geometric breakdown on the projection. "The source is not a natural phenomenon. It is a signal, a broadcast attempting to rewrite the foundational code of local reality. A signal that has been active for millennia, only now achieving the necessary power to manifest its destructive potential across the larger structure." Valerius concluded the presentation, the weight of his singular ship suddenly seeming insignificant compared to the reality he unveiled. "We did not come to join the Triarchy, because the Triarchy exists within the system we are now tasked to repair. We came because your political complexity prevented you from acting decisively against the first symptom. We are not diplomats. We are the maintenance crew responding to the systemic failure alarm. Humanity is not seeking a seat at your council. We are mobilizing to prevent the entire structure from collapsing into meaningless chaos." The grand chamber fell into a silence colder and deeper than the vacuum itself. The Triarchy, masters of 1,000 worlds, arbiters of civilized space, had been revealed as sophisticated custodians of a crumbling edifice, utterly blind to the true mechanics of their own survival, utterly reliant on the sudden, terrifying arrival of a species that saw the universe not as a territory to be governed, but as a complex machine in urgent need of diagnostics and repair. They had sent a dangerous ship, yes, dangerous not to the Triarchy, but to the very forces that threatened to unmake existence itself. And now, humanity was preparing to launch into the true frontier, leaving the squabbling empires to reckon with their sudden, terrifying irrelevance.